So this is about, do workers need protecting from AI? You've got copies of the Hazards magazine, which is a wonderful publication, which we are closely associated with, and there's a great article in there. This is the Workers' Memorial Day special. There's a great article in there on AI from Rory O'Neill. If you've got time to read it, it's fabulous. It's called Code Red, and I'm sure you'll find it useful. You've also got a copy of the IER publication, I can't say the word, Algorithmic Management and New Generation of Rights at Work, which is really interesting if you have a chance to read it. It looks at the challenges, the rise of management, algorithmic management, and the challenges that are faced, and some solutions as well. So, and then you've got a wonderful poster that's been produced for Workers' Memorial Day. Please put it up in any place you can, because it gets people talking about the issue, and I think it's a really, really useful poster this year. So this year's Workers' Memorial Day has a theme. We remember people who have been killed and injured at work, but we also campaign on an issue, so to remember the dead and fight for the living. And the campaigning issue this year is on the theme which was decided by the ETC, the European Trade Union Congress, and it's on AI and digital platforms and their impact on the fundamental rights that we have on health and safety. So a few years ago it became a health and safety at work became a fundamental right, and this year we're looking at how it's impacted by AI. The General Secretary says that the world of work is changing and rapidly, profoundly and permanently by digitalisation, AI, robotics, platform work, the green transition, and it's reshaping how we labour and work and live. But while these transformations offer new opportunities, they also bring new dangers. Chief amongst them are the increasing psychosocial risks faced by workers: stress, burnout, anxiety, harassment, isolation, and emotional exhaustion. And they're not frivolous issues. They're systemic, and they're escalating. So with that in mind, we're going to have a really interesting and thought-provoking discussion. I'm so sorry about the technical issues at the beginning, but hopefully you'll be able to hear our speakers. We've got three speakers here. Adam Cantwell-Corn, who's from the TEC, and it's great that he's able to join us. And I'm really sorry, Adam, that we've had all those issues to begin. We've also got in the room John Morgan, who's the Manchester Branch and District Secretary of the NEU, Teachers Union, and Ian Hodson, who's the President of the Bakers Union. And we're going to hear from those speakers first, and then we will open it up to some discussion, if that's okay. So our first speaker then is Adam. Adam, over to you. I'll let you run the...
Thank you, Janet, and thank you everyone. I think persevering I was planning to be with you in person, but I had a medical procedure earlier this week and was strongly advised not to travel, so glad to be here anyway. So yeah, as Janet said, my name is Adam. I work at TEC Tech Project, but predominantly focused on AI, and that's going to be the focus of my part of this conversation today. I'm not a health and safety expert, but what I'll try to do is just sort of frame the sort of broader issues that we're facing as the labour movement around AI, and try to tackle this broader question of do workers need protecting from AI, and then obviously others on the panel and within the room will pick up the health and safety angles. So yeah, again, really happy to be here, and I'll talk for about 20-25 minutes or so, and then we'll jump into the rest of the speakers who are looking forward to hearing. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what is AI. It's bandied about a lot, and it's important we break it down. Second, how can it affect workers in lots of different ways? And then really importantly, how to move beyond understanding to what is an empowered human response and how we build that. So, defining AI. I'm going to use the OECD's explanation here. There's a lot of words on the page right now, but I'm going to break it down for you. But first of all, I'm going to read it out. An AI system is a machine-based system that, for explicit or implicit objectives, infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. So I said it's a bit of a mouthful, so let's break it down. So an AI system is a machine-based system. So far, pretty straightforward. For explicit or implicit objectives, i.e. it has goals or it has some sort of purpose or aim by which it's been programmed to achieve. It infers, therefore, in other words, it makes predictions based on the input, i.e. the data, so the information that goes into the system, and then it makes predictions to achieve those objectives, and then generates outputs such as content, recommendations, or decisions. As you probably gather from the idea of objectives, from data, from predictions, contents, anything that you might do with all of that, these are really human, political, and practical questions. So one of the things that I try to do when I talk about this is be like, we're not talking about AI, we're also talking about human issues, we're talking about political things, we're talking about practical application of these technologies to real life. And I try to kind of like demystify the sort of magical marketing that's put forward often by some of the big tech companies who want to kind of like make it all about sort of hyper-complex systems, and they are in many ways. But one of the things that we need to do is challenge that and be like, there are accountable human beings and corporate structures behind that, and we need to lift the curtain as they do in The Wizard of Oz, and we need to start paying attention to people behind the curtain. So to come to that question then that frames this event, do workers need protection from AI? The other way to think about it might be, do workers need protection from the way humans use AI rather than AI in and of itself, because AI is a tool. But it's a tool, but it's not a single technology. Often we use this word artificial intelligence, but that's sometimes criticised as a marketing term, but not particularly descriptive or helpful for actually understanding what we're dealing with. Because AI, machine learning, data-driven technologies, whatever you want to call it, it's actually a range of technologies with common features. It's not one technology or even one sector. So it's the sort of technologies that you are starting to find in automated shipping. It's the same sort of technologies, using that definition that I referred to, that medical professionals will use to assist them in finding pattern recognition in scans. It's the same sort of technologies that are being used in facial recognition, and of course ChatGPT, which was really the form of AI technology that exploded it into public consciousness and political discourse and really rocked the world a couple of years ago. So I'm just going to break down a couple of the key kind of forms of AI. Generative AI, which is like ChatGPT, it's a powerful but flawed and problematic technology. So for example, Air Canada was ordered to pay a customer who was misled by an airline's chatbot because they basically were seeking to replace and automate workers and put in its place chatbots, but that chatbot in the end started giving out incorrect information, and the airline faced legal action. Or humorously, though perhaps even dangerously, there's nothing changed, but there was a period where you could type certain things into Google and it would give you ludicrous answers. So for example, you could type into Google something like, how many rocks should I eat? And it would say, according to University of California geologists, eating at least one small rock per day was recommended. Another thing, the New York Times erroneously pushed a notification, and this happened by the BBC as well, that carried fake and inaccurate news. For example, it was saying the Netanyahu was arrested. That wasn't in fact true, although we could hopefully live in hope to see that one day. Automated decision-making is another powerful but flawed AI type of technology. So for example, you may have heard the stories of Uber and gig economy drivers being robo-fired, where they basically just get a notification on the app that they're using for their work and says they're no longer able to access the platform to pick up drives or to pick up food or wherever it might be, and they don't get any notification or rationale or notice for what that is. Actually, a bunch of workers were successful in challenging Uber on that report. We'll discuss that more later if you like. We also extend outside of work. So for example, in Holland, there was a major scandal where the Dutch government's welfare benefits ministry started to use automated decision-making to identify and pursue people who were considered to be claiming benefits fraudulently. It turned out that this algorithmic system basically just began targeting and suggesting the prosecution of individuals whose predominant features were just that they had names that were not quite Dutch. And that actually ended up causing the downfall of the Dutch government. And that's something for the UK government to consider as that is being pushed out aggressively through public services. There's also a newer form application of AI called agentic AI, which is a form of AI technology that combines things like generative AI, automated decision-making. It can take control of your computer and complete tasks or require workflows independently. So you can imagine that that is the sort of things that humans do. We sequence tasks together and then we perform them to get a wider outcome. There is obviously still early days on this. For example, Anthropic, one of the biggest, most important American companies developing this, was doing a demonstration of a agentic AI system that was meant to be able to do computer programming. For unknown reason, including to the company, Claude, which is the name of the system, took a break from the coding demo and just began to peruse photos of Yellowstone National Park for inexplicable reasons. It just obviously just started to take a break, and the company didn't actually know why it did that. In this case, obviously, that's kind of a humorous example, but we can imagine circumstances where it's not so funny. As it turns out, that company has actually now recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the UK government to introduce these technologies into public services. However, that same company explicitly bans the use of AI tools in applications for the jobs to that very company. So it's important that we do cut through the hype and challenge and critique and hold accountable for the claims that are being made by those who stand to profit the most from AI technologies. But also we need to understand that today is the worst the technology is ever going to be, and we might see the continual progression of this technology. And as the labour movement and as people who are concerned about human well-being and flourishing, we need to be prepared for those eventualities. So for example, if you take OpenAI's O3 model, which is new, a professor in the States gave it this prompt where you just type in an instruction and it said, come up with 20 clever ideas for marketing slogans for a new mail order cheese shop. Develop criteria and then select the best one. Then build a financial marketing plan for the shop, revising as needed and analysing competition. Then generate an appropriate logo using the image generator and build a website and a marketing plan. With that single prompt in less than 2 minutes, the AI provided a list of slogans, ranked and selected an option, did a web research, developed a logo, and built marketing and financial plans, and launched a skeleton demonstration website. So we can start to see the power of these sorts of technologies and what it means for the future of work and well-being of workers and our ability as workers in the labour movement to claim some of the productivity gains that come from technology development. And that's obviously in the broader political context in the UK and many other places where, as the Prime Minister said, there's an intention and explicit policy programme to mainline AI into the veins of the UK economy. So, to go back to the definition of how I explained AI at the beginning, about how it uses data to make predictions to perform certain tasks, then we can think about AI as an automation technology. And there's an automation technology in 2 ways. It's an automation of management, for example, the ways that Janet described algorithmic management, so performance management, allocations, tasks, bonuses, reprimands, disciplinaries, that sort of stuff, as well as of the actual work that workers do. So the big thing that kind of like made this of popular awareness was Amazon worker surveillance that led to extreme stress and anxiety because of extreme micromanagement. And then the other side of it, the automation, is actually automating the tasks that workers might do. So for example, In some Amazon warehouses, you have workers who are micromanaged within an inch of their lives by algorithmic management systems, but in other warehouses, they're almost entirely automated by robots who would otherwise be doing what otherwise humans would be doing. There's a lot of predictions about the sort of impact on the labour market and jobs and work. The IMF has the statistic that AI impacts 60% of our economy jobs. It doesn't mean 60% jobs are going to go, but it means that there's 60% of jobs that have profiles of tasks and work that they do that will be exposed to different AI technologies that they introduced at the beginning. Obviously, some people say, and perhaps credibly, that AI could enhance almost 2/3 of British jobs. That's Google, so you can take that with a pinch of salt. But there are arguments for AI work. They include reducing barriers to knowledge and skills. So if we can use things like generative AI to access different forms of knowledge and skills, then we can reduce inequality, including the inequalities that are born into the system by people who are able to access expensive further education, further and higher education. It can deliver more menial work, meaning that human workers can carry on to do the more challenging and rewarding work. It can use remote and autonomous technology to remove workers from safety hazards, which is obviously important for the concerns that we have here today in health and safety. And more generally, at the economic level, it can increase jobs and productivity, which theoretically then there's more wealth to share around for people's living standards and overall well-being. One example that is quite prolifically used in the UK at the moment is artificial intelligence used by social workers who reported that they reduced their admin tasks by more than 60% in a recent pilot scheme. That's something where they were able to, social workers actually reported that they were able to reduce their admin tasks and therefore were able to engage in more meaningful activities, including with clients and people in need. However, I was speaking to a former teacher and union rep the other day who reported something quite different and interesting. She said that AI tools are helping with my workload, but they're not helping with my job satisfaction. And he's not sure about how it's changing the learning experience of students as well. So in this case, AI tools were helping him to kind of get through lesson planning, but the lesson planning part was actually the work he wanted to do, because that's where he has creativity and autonomy and where his professional skills and judgment come through, and in fact why he wanted to be a teacher in the first place, and he didn't want that part of the work to be automated. So that leads then to the arguments against AI work. The arguments against AI work include the surveillance and micromanagement pieces, as is really prolific within the gig economy, but increasingly across other parts of the conventional labour market. Related work intensification and stress, because there's a sort of managerial oversight over every movement they take. There's the de-skilling part, so with that teacher, if a lot of your work as your skilled work as an educator is being replaced by AI, then you're potentially being de-skilled, and that affects your dignity, your autonomy, and then eventually, potentially, your job security if a machine can do it. There's also questions around accountability and redress. So if machines are making decisions about whether you're hired or fired, or your pay, or your disciplinaries, whatever it might be, then how do you make sure that you can actually have routes to clear accountability for the people behind the curtain, as I started with, and have meaningful redress for that? So all of these are key issues of bargaining power for workers. They're not separate, they're not some technology question over there. They are key and increasingly fundamental and central to the development of our economy and the experience of work in the UK and many other places. But at the same time, these are not new. Tech-related change and challenges are not new to the labour movement. We've been working with them, experiencing them in various different ways, from the Luddites who set out to smash machines that they thought were going to displace their labour, to the mass automation of factory and manufacturing production, and even the very idea of the clock, which was introduced as a means to kind of rationalise and monitor and manage labour and workflow processes during the Industrial Revolution and around that time. So, all of that is to say, this is not necessarily about, this question is not necessarily about being pro or anti-AI. It's about specific technologies, to be more precise about those technologies that we're talking about and its context and its impacts, and crucially, who has the power to shape it and how do they get to that. So the challenge then that we're working on at TC and many others in the labour movement and allies are working on is broadly building a pro-worker AI and innovation agenda. So what do I mean by that? One is the change and development in industrial relations that is needed to reflect this new technological change within our economy, law and regulation around that, and then the circumstances that kind of inform the development of innovation, so it doesn't just reward big tech companies and those who own machines, but is distributed more fairly across the economy. So I'll just dig into those a little bit more. So obviously industrial action, industrial relations is a key part of dealing with these technologies. And many of you may be familiar with new technology agreements that came in the earlier waves of IT introduction into workplaces. One of the things that is increasingly starting to happen is there's a wave of new technology agreements. Many of these have happened in the US because of the kind of advanced state of both AI and the degradation of general labour and worker rights within the US context. So you might have heard of the Hollywood writers unions who had a kind of like landmark strike against some of the biggest companies in Hollywood, and the writers won significant protections where writers would have to be informed that generative AI has been used or will be used on rights material, and writers would also not be forced by employers to use AI. So that was a big breakthrough moment for the trade union movement on challenging employer power and prerogative on introducing AI. Another example is the Teamsters and United Parcel Service, who bargained with the employers to introduce a committee for technological change, which has some resonance with the new technology agreements of previous generations, where there's equal employer and union representation, and within that agreement there was up to 6 months, and in certain circumstances at least 45 days notice in writing of technology deployment, meaning that the union could anticipate and organise and respond to technology developments without being caught on the hop or just being notified as it was being introduced. There are some examples from the UK around the development of kind of collective bargaining provisions. There's also just sort of like more basic kind of industrial campaigns. So the CWU led a extremely successful rapid campaign against OpenReach, this attempt to introduce AI-enabled motion recognition cameras that were facing the driver within the cab of the van. And those cameras were able to give seemingly the emotionally monitored emotional state of the driver, give nudges. Obviously that's an intrusive privacy issue as well as a health and safety issue if you're driving and you've got some machine barking at you. The CWU successfully fought off that proposal without having to take industrial action, and I'm actually working with the CWU telecoms finance constituency on developing a more strategic and proactive approach around these issues across all of the industries that they have with members in. The other piece, of course, is law and regulation. So the TUC has the AI employment model bill, which forms part of the advocacy and political lobbying efforts that we put into governments to get them to put into law certain protections and guidelines, guardrails on how AI can be used at work. So that's strengthening consultation, that's ensuring that there's meaningful transparency and observability, and including prohibitions on the types of technology that BT tried to introduce OpenReach that the CWU successfully fought off. The final plank is how do we build a pro-worker innovation economy that is forward-looking and embraces technological change as something that can be uplifting and generative for everybody in the university research agendas so that the technology that is being developed and funded often by public money is influenced by workers and unions so that they don't create technologies that eventually hit the shop floor but that have regressive or harmful impacts on workers. Using the power of public procurement to shape markets. So the public sector is huge and the most important buyers of AI technology, and therefore they're able to shape the behavior of technology companies and providers. Industrial democracy and corporate governance, these are obviously traditional positions of the trade union movement, but they're there to sort of, this one is basically saying workers need to be able to participate in the decisions further upstream and not just at the deployment level of technologies to make sure that they're not harmful in any way. And there's obviously skills and retraining, so if there is disruption or displacement of jobs, there's a just tech transition. And then finally, sharing the gains of productivity boosts. So it's yet to materialize, and we'll see if it actually does. And if there is a big leap forward in productivity, it's important that workers are able to claim some of that and democratize economic development, and so it doesn't just get captured by a select few of tech companies. The final thing I will say before wrapping up is that at the moment there's a growing sense of concern and fear around this. So for example, the Institute for the Futures of Work, Future of Work, which is a think tank, did a survey that found the workers are reporting a pervasive sense of anxiety, fear and uncertainty about the introduction of AI technology for all sorts of reasons. I mentioned intensification, health and safety issues, job security. But the question that I'll leave it with you now is that for the labour movement, AI actually could present an opportunity for renewal, because there's an opportunity to lead, to sort of demonstrate the union's position, the trade union movement's position as a public interest champion for actual tech progress, and not leave the progress of technology in the hands of just a handful of tech companies that have narrow incentives and to claim it for the benefit of everyone in the country. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam. That was really interesting. It gives a really broad overview of AI. And I think for the health and safety hats that I've been wearing, you know, when you're talking about some of the concerns, you know, the surveillance, micromanagement, intensity and stress, and on the other hand, we have the management standards, which are supposed to look at what decent work stands for. Decent work stands for, you know, is having control over the work that we do, being able to work to their demands, you know, that they're not over demands, that we get the proper support as workers, that we have good relationships between us, that we know what our role is, and we know, you know, that we're able to manage change properly. And when you look at some of those things that you're raising, you know, as concerns, that certainly is riding roughshod over the management standards and work-related, you know, and would cause work-related stress. But thank you ever so much for that contribution. And I'm going to quickly move on to John, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll try and cut it down because we're obviously running late, so give me a shout as well if I'm talking too much. So I am John from the Manchester NEU. I'd like to thank Janet for inviting me this evening. I'm not an expert on AI, so I want to try and avoid pitfalls like Linda McMahon, the Secretary of State for Education. I use the words like loosely in America, who just rambled on recently on a TV interview about A1 and clearly not knowing what she was talking about. I did say to somebody this afternoon I was talking about artificial insemination this evening, so I'll have to try and make sure I'm saying the right words. So I'm not an expert, that's what I'm trying to say. However, I've come to realise that my profession, education, and my personal life as well is going to be really impacted by AI. And I think it's the same for everybody in the room. It doesn't matter what you are, whether you're in work or out of work, it's going to have a huge impact. So it's really important that certain parts of society agree on what AI should look like and how it should be monitored and you know, the legal aspects of it. So different people have got different ideas about what AI are, and we're things that come under the umbrella. Thinking of education, Gen AI, so the generative stuff that produces documents, produces stuff, in other words, rather than just making decisions, would be the thing that most teachers would be looking at and encountering in their everyday lives and pupils as well. But they're already, using things like this. So everybody's familiar with AI systems such as search engines, smart assistants. We heard about the chatbot that didn't know what it was doing and was blamed by its employer. We've all used that navigation app, so I use one to get here tonight. So this idea about AI is not new. It's just that it's becoming more prevalent and seeping into other areas. So you might notice big changes, for example, in Google search. Now, there's always an AI version at the top of your Google search, combining lots of different websites for you, handily in one place. That can be really useful. I've got a new car, I can see it from here. And when I log on, because I have to put fingerprints on it, she says in a rather posh voice, "Hello John, how are you?" And I say, I'm good, thank you. And if I say, "How are you?" she answers back, she says, "All the better for speaking with you." So, I thought, this is amazing. I tried to tell her how crap my job was, or I'd had a fight with my partner, and it didn't go that far, she was not interested. But we're sort of getting to that stage where you get into your car, and AI is literally talking to you. So this is something that's going to be in everyday life. What we're going to talk about, though, is, again, how it's going to be used in education. That's my part tonight. So generative AI is, as I said...
We have that bright light on. If I'm looking at you, might we have to have a bright light behind you?
It's just that we're ready for the next speaker, so we can keep it going.
Well, we're listening to him, not the next speaker.
So just carry on, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Ridiculous.
we can put information into ChatGPT, and when Janet asked me, I was a bit busy, and I genuinely thought, oh, should I just put something into ChatGPT? If you've never used it, it will write a speech for you. I won't tell you whether I did that until we get to the end of the speech and you can guess whether or not it's a real speech. So that is something that's happening, but what we can't sort of at the moment think is that it's like science fiction. It's not like HAL in 2001 or Holly in Red Dwarf. These systems are not thinking. All they're doing is they're collecting data together and basically finding patterns and being able to do that really quickly in order to give us advice or make decisions for us. So that's really important as well, because of who is putting all that data in and what data do we put in for the AI to be able to make those choices and those decisions. Okay, so recently I was at a talk in the Mechanics Institute that we put on at Manchester NAU. There's a teacher called Mr. P, some of you might have heard of, and he's really popular with young teachers especially, and he's really into his technology and AI, and he was doing a CPD session after work about how you can use this stuff in your everyday lessons. Now, I know we're not all teachers here, but you probably understand most teachers would have to write a lesson plan. You can literally just put the words into ChatGPT, the keywords, and it will write a lesson plan for you. And I was sitting with one of our regional organisers who helped get the event together, and she said, "Look here, you're going to do a branch plan, for want of a better word, which is just nonsense, it's just bureaucratic rubbish, don't call it that. It's just gave the General Secretary as we say that. But it is a pain in the butt. And my colleague from regional office said, "Look here, I'll do this," and she just typed in some stuff. And it came out with a plan for my branch over the next 12 months. The problem is, that content is not good. So it looks amazing when you see it, but as soon as you start looking at it in more detail, you can start picking holes in it. And this is really important, because what we're going to realise is we can use this as a tool now, but we can't just rely on it, and it might get better in the future. But what we're doing really is producing raw documents, raw resources. But we're always going to have to look at it and say, okay, what we've done is we've taken 3/4 of the effort out of this, and this might help us with our work-life balance, but I'm still going to have to look at it and make sure that it's not coming up with nonsense. And it will come up with nonsense because the data that's being inputted into these systems has bias in it. And if the wrong data is inputted into it, then that bias will come out in those decisions and those resources. Okay? So Gen AI is able to be able to convince you that it's giving you something really useful. And it's like people who just talk really confidently, but it's nonsense. But as long as they talk confidently, you will believe them. It's exactly what I'm doing now. Right? So this is what we have to realise about these systems, and not first of all, as educators, fall into the trap of just saying, right, this is it. You know, we can flick a switch. We've got a lesson plan. We can flick a switch. We've got a resource. There will be something in every one of those things that you need to change. So what we want out in education from AI is that staff have got more free time and professional control, and it's enhancing their teaching. But what's a really, really slippery slope is that what will happen is that it'll increase pupil-teacher ratios. Because somebody will have the bright idea in government that you can have more than 30 pupils in it. I mean, we shouldn't have 30 anyway, by the way. You have more than 30 pupils in the classroom because the AI is making it easier. Somebody will say in Whitehall, oh, well, you don't need to do all that work now, so you can spend a lot more time data inputting or doing stuff that's just totally irrelevant to the education of your children. And the volume of work might actually increase rather than going down. So I think that's the message. If we're going to be able to use AI in education, we really need to watch it, because if you go either way, it can reduce workload or it can make it much, much worse. Okay, so we've got to worry about where the information is coming from. So we've seen Elon Musk purchasing X and other online services that he's bought. This is a real danger, because again, if we're going to have access to huge amounts of data, where's it coming from and which data is being chosen? And that's really important in education. So again, that idea of like just putting some keywords into ChatGPT, getting a lesson plan, is it saying something which, if you look at it twice, you think, oh, that's not appropriate. And this is a real worry. Again, I'm just going to try and flip through a little bit here, guys, because we're a little bit behind. So, school policies then, what are we looking at? Schools should adopt and use digital technologies to support and enhance teaching and learning in ways that support equality, equity and inclusion. Obviously, that's a hot topic at the moment. So in America, what's happening under Donald Trump? Will AI in American schools be doing that? Will our schools be asked not to do that if we make a trade deal with America? There are all kinds of implications here. And that has to be absolutely written into the fabric of AI being used in our schools. Staff and the union should be engaged in decisions about the design and development of these systems. Is that going to happen? Or is it going to be a top-down system whereby people are just given these resources? The DFE themselves have said that there's no guarantee that if they use a particular AI software, that it will not stay in the same hands or control of particular companies. They have no control over that or the original content that's being used in it. So this is a real worry in schools. It can be a real benefit, but it can also be introducing ideas that we do not want in our schools. And also, are staff going to be given the opportunity to actually learn how to use these resources? So the one I've just spoken about in mechanics, Master MEU paid for and put that on ourselves. That was not, something that came from the schools. We've already had a generation of teachers over the last 25 years who just couldn't cope with the introduction, even of emails. I know, some teachers who are now long retired, but they never got head around emails. And it completely messed up 40 years of teaching for them. We've got to understand there's going to be a huge generation. It's not all youngsters who just easily adapt, who need that training. Because one thing that we're aware of in teaching is the incredible pressure from Ofsted and the capability procedures that are put on teachers at the drop of a hat. And this is something different. This is not just a school saying, well, we don't think your ability in the classroom based on what you've learned 30 or 20 years ago is the same. This is saying, this is brand new, it might be difficult to get your head around. And teachers could be hauled up and criticised over the performance if they don't have the correct CPD on it. So that's something that we really need to worry about as well. There's bigger concerns, and it's less about education, but I'll just briefly mention it because I'm trying to cut the time down. There are huge green concerns about this. Now, one thing that the MEU, my union, is doing at the moment is trying to increase the number of green reps in schools. For obvious reasons, I don't need to have to go into what they would be doing within schools. These are public institutions, we want them to be energy conscious, etc. But the actual use of these systems is creating big environmental impacts. They use huge amounts of water to cool down their data stations. They're building them in places like Colorado where there's not much water anyway, and sucking the water out of the landscape and using it to cool down basically their data farms. This is increasing the amount of electricity power that's being used. So, for example, there's one report, I think it's from the London School of Economics, that says by 2028, over 25% of Ireland's electricity could be being used by tech companies in Ireland, as opposed to the general population for what we would normally consider industry and domestic use. So this is a huge difference, and there's a fact in here which I probably can't find now because I've gone work life, which says that basically an AI search in comparison to just a Google search uses something like 10 or 20 times as much electricity by the time that the data farms halfway across the world have worked out what you want and what they do. So this is a big environmental impact. It's creating heat, it's using water, it's using resources. Also the rare earths, you might have heard, it's quite a hot topic at the moment. What's Donald Trump trying to do with Zelensky in Ukraine, and they talk about China having all the rare earth metals. These materials are being used in this new technology, so obviously that's fine if we're all sensible and rational as a species. But how many wars are going to be started if those resources are being monopolised by China or by other countries? So this is something that we have to think of as well. So the environmental impact is a big thing. It doesn't necessarily impact schools straight away, but as I said, we are trying to increase our green credentials and green reps in our schools. So I just thought I'd mention it. Exploitation of work is a lot of the work that goes into these search engines and the AI bots. The data is being inputted in the southern half of the hemisphere for people or with people who are on particular wages and basically being exploited. So from a trade union point of view as well, like most things, whether or not you wear trainers that have been hand-stitched by children or your iPhone from China has got dodgy credentials, we need to worry about that as well. Who are the workers that are being used in other parts of the planet to produce these AI systems? Getting back more to what we've then seen in school, obviously if we're running off resources from ChatGPT or something, we've got to worry about things like copyright. You might have heard various musicians in the press recently, and you might have heard examples where people are listening to music and that's Paul Simon, that's Paul McCartney. It's not, it's been generated by AI. I know there's some of us who, when we go to concerts, we just want to hear the early stuff, and it might be a blessing if we can get more of that. But it's actually taking the living away from artists. It's not just musicians. So recently there was an LP or a CD album, I'll just use the word album, that was released. 1,000 artists, including Kate Bush, Annie Lennox, and Damon Albarn, and that was just silent. And it was a protest album to bring people's attentions to that people are being ripped off. I mean, with the advent of streaming music, that's already happened, where artists are being paid something like 0.001 pence per stream. But this is making it even worse now. Their music, it's not just the fact that somebody might produce music that sounds like Paul McCartney and sell it. To do that, the AI has got to sample Paul McCartney's music. And that is taking away money, not just from multi-millionaire like Paul McCartney, but younger up-and-coming bands. And this is going to be thought about. The same way in schools, if things are being used in that way, there might be copyright on books, on materials, and those AI companies are not paying copyright on that material that they are using to form their AI output. See, time's it?
It's 7 minutes now.
A couple more minutes. So just a couple of things then that, as I said, from an education point of view, what are we worried about? First of all, data protection and privacy. You could see a point where decisions are being made about children in relation to their parents. So if I deal with stuff all the time where, shocking stuff, there was a story the other day where a child had been caught cannabis in school and he went missing for hours and stuff, things like that. If we get to a situation where we're using AI and it's flagged up to a pastoral head in school that that particular child should not be allowed to go home, or that particular child's parents have got issues, where is that data stored? I mean, we already have GDPR issues, but if that was starting to become part of an AI system, who would store that information? do we have the right to do that? Do we have the right to make those decisions? And like we said at the beginning, it's not a thinking process, it's just coming up with a pattern. And if an AI system said that child has to be sent to social services or that child can't be sent home, no, I'm just making this up, this is not happening at the moment, but that's a clear indication of where we could go. How would we deal with that? Bias and prejudice. AI systems are supposed to be able to help children learn, but the problem is that from early research it looks as though it makes everything very homogenous. Everybody comes out talking and writing the same way. So where would the James Joyces and the Virginia Woolfs be of tomorrow with their streams of consciousness who ripped up all the rules if AI is helping to teach children to speak and write and read in a particular manner? Personalisation, again, there's a worry that it's supposed to be personalised, but what it does is it pulls children away from each other if AI is being used to direct to them rather than working in a group. Those communities are really important. Anybody who's in education will probably know about a guy called Zagotsky, who's a post-revolutionary Russian who talked about children sitting with each other and encouraging each other, the ones who have better academic abilities pulling the other ones along. That would not happen if we're looking at individual children being tutored by AI. And that's something to worry about. Students should be encouraged to think critically as well about this. So if we're just going along the lines of a child can put in some keywords for their exam and it comes up with it and it says Hitler's great or Keir Starmer's great or whatever, what we need to do is have some and I wasn't, by the way, I was not comparing Keir Starmer to Hitler. That just came out of my mouth. But what we want to do is teach those children some critical thinking. Is that going to be part of the future in education? Are we going to be using all these brilliant tools, but at the same time, are we going to be given the space to say to kids, what you get from this system is not necessarily right or the best or even true? And how do you deal with that? And that's really important, and that has to be built into it as well. So I'll finish now. So overall, it's new technology and we need to embrace it. But like anything else, we need to make sure that it works properly. You know, when Gutenberg invented the printing press, he probably never envisaged something like Mein Kampf being printed on one. But we still don't ban books, we use books every day. Same with social media. Lots of my friends don't like social media, but I say to them, well, if you get the algorithm right, you get rid of all the cat videos and everything, you'll end up getting political stuff and stuff that just appeals to yourself. It can be used. And we have to see AI like that, something new that we can't escape. We need to lay those rules down in schools.
Ian, please don't stand with this. I don't know what's going on. So I find it very difficult having to look at that light. Why we have to have it on? I'm sure we're all bright enough, we've read it.
It's not the light, it's a presentation.
You're going to see the presentation.
Well, maybe you're making a presentation, but while he was speaking, we have to
keep going, sorry, we've got very little time.
So, I don't know if you see this earlier on, but at Liverpool today there's been a death, a forklift truck driver. At the port of Liverpool, they've shut the docks down. And I thought it was quite, especially, Workers' Memorial Day on the 28th. Very, very soon after recognising the importance of the need to have safety in work and a forklift truck driver being killed at work. So obviously, sorry if it's blinded you. I did it in black and white because it's health and safety, you see. And
that's fine if you're talking to it.
Yeah, what's the next slide? Can you what's the next slide? Thank you very much. Obviously, the aim of my presentation is definitely to talk about the issues of health and safety. Now, when I first started working in the food industry, I started working in 1989, biscuit factory in Blackpool. At that particular time, what was really, really interesting was they were trying to automate a biscuit plant. One of the main products we made was Maryland cookies, but they couldn't automate it. And the reason they couldn't automate it was because at that particular time, everything had to be perfect. And the problem with a cookie is with nuts and chocolate in it, it couldn't make a perfect circle. So they had to get rid of it. When I left that job, they were automating a cooking plant because technology had moved on. And I started as a full-time official for the union. One of my first jobs was to go up to a factory that had just burnt down in Carlisle. It burnt down because of a cooking plant. The company set up the machine on a Saturday night, ready for running in the Sunday morning. It was Rathbone's factory, I don't know if you can remember it. It was very unlucky at that particular time in Carlisle because, believe it or not, they had floods, they had fire, and they also got hit by lots of insects. It was really like a plague up there. You know, it's not funny, I know, but it is true. It did happen. And that crumpet plant had 32 people per shift. That shift ran 7 days a week and had 32 people. And the reason why it's an interesting point is because when I stopped being a full-time official, became a national president, the first place I visited was a site in Enfield, a Warburton site, where they had a crumpet plant. And on their crumpet plant, they'd automated it. And instead of 32 workers, they had 1. Because now the crumpets can be done by 1 worker who goes in a box, and basically, if you press these buttons, the buttons make the product, you know, put it into the mixers and everything. The mixers send it out, basically make it how it needs to be made. It goes into the dough, and obviously then it goes through the process, and then at the end, it wraps itself, it packs itself, it stacks itself, and then it takes itself off into the warehouse, where that's the next time a human being will actually touch it. You know, so from the ingredients coming in, obviously the delivery man is probably the human being that touches it before it's made into the product, and then the end product when it's going out of the factory door. And in fact, really, when you think about it, if you go to one of those checkouts in Tesco's or Asda, potentially it's never been touched by a human being unless you go to the girl on the counter and pay at the counter. But if you use one of those machines, then technically it's just a machine product, isn't it? It's been made totally by machines, but it's also reduced a lot of work. So trying to put a bit of a human story. Marie now works beside a cobot. Cobot's a new word for your colleague. I mean, obviously we used to have colleagues, now we have cobots. Hasn't reduced her workload though. It's actually double the pace that she needs to work at, because obviously the machinery is being sped up, and it's the machine that's now encouraging the speed and the pace of the machine. Obviously workers are being monitored more. And our members often tell us they feel valued less, and obviously encouraged to work harder. I mean, clearly we're not against change. We're not the Luddites. Maybe we could some tactics, I don't know. But we need, as workers, to demand a safe, fair and union-controlled change. We need to be involved in the process. You know, next slide. Thank you very much. We've just had the Food and Drink Manufacturing Forum that you know, oversees the union, the employers' health and safety, and sets what the bars for our industry. Recently gave us a presentation, and obviously they were claiming, you know, robots will improve safety. Well, we say not if you're having to sprint to keep up. You know, our response is if it's just increasing the workload for us, then that's not improving safety. They say we're going to have better jobs. Now I'm doing negotiations where I'm being told that a lot of the skilled work that we do will be going, and a lot of the manual tasks that robots can't do at the moment will actually be the jobs that our people get left with. And obviously because it's just basically taking a lot of skills out, then we can expect our wages to go down. So that's really not helping us. So we need to talk about, you know, how technology impacts, certainly in the food sector, but you know, it's not just the food sector. This is, right, you know, we talk about education. I mean, how long before, you know, the education department turns around and says, well, actually, we don't need teachers to do that anymore. All we need you to do is make sure you just go and do this in the classroom. It's a bit like, I want to go and see the GP, so they then give you an appointment to go and see the chemist. So they can decide on what prescription you're having. I mean, so we can see how they're reducing the skills right across the economy. And obviously, also very, very key, there has got to be consultation. You know, far too often, employers just think, well, you know, it's really good for you, we're just going to introduce it and get on with it. In fact, like one of the factories over in Ireland did that. They introduced this machinery. Unfortunately, they had to spend on the expensive machinery. The machine came in, it started really well. Took a couple of people out of the warehouse. And obviously felt a bit overworked and decided it didn't like the job and actually committed suicide, basically. It blew itself up because it didn't feel comfortable with doing the job. So they've taken those robots out over there. They're probably looking at how they develop going forward, because obviously, you know, we know that in our warehouses, the amount of robots that are coming in now is incredible. You know, I mean, I work with a company and the size of their warehouse, I mean, it's as big as Amazon. I mean, if you can imagine the bread, you know, warehouse, you know, as big as an Amazon warehouse, it's incredible. For the distribution, you take to the next slide for me. Thank you very much. See if it works. But we need. So what do we need to do? So we need to map where automation is happening in the workplace. And I think, you know, one of the key things from a trade union perspective is we need to recruit more safety reps. We need to make sure that we've got, when we're mapping out the areas of where this stuff's coming in, we need to be making sure that we're mapping out whether or not we've got safety reps in those areas. And we need to be taking part in doing joint risk assessments. That's why I would, you know, say, make sure we've got a safety rep in that area. And obviously, I did a presentation to one of our regions last week about sometimes people don't understand that health and safety improvements, workers' improvements, is about building union power. You know, and I was saying to you, know, do you go and talk to people on the floor? And when you talk to people on the floor, do you ask them, you know, what is the issues you face in this area? And they'll go, yeah, I do that, yeah. So what do you do once they've told you? They'll say, well, I'll go and see if I can get it fixed. Great, but then what do you do? Oh, nothing. I says, but you never go back to that person and say, thanks for raising that, because you've raised it, we've probably protected someone from getting injured. That's the power of workers working collectively and the power of the trade union coming together. You never think about promoting that, because those wins help build union power. And that's really key if we're going to demonstrate the difference that workers collectively can have in the workplace. It's really, really important that we do that. So, we have legal rights. And obviously, you know, I think both obviously as myself and the TUC mentioned, you know, but we have legal rights. And again, if we're recruiting health and safety reps, and health and safety reps are understanding what the brown book is, getting a bit of tuning and getting some stuff from hazards and understanding their role, they will know that they have rights and they must be consulted. They will know that the law requires a risk assessment. I mean, we talked about the new technology agreements. Most union recognition agreements recognise new technology coming in. You know, the people before us, the trade unions, you know, preempted, you know, what comes down the line and built in protections for us. We may have forgotten, But if we actually go through our recognition agreements or our agreements, we're 3 minutes in there, and we need to start utilising it. You know, and we have the right to negotiate, and we should use it. It's critical. You know, we have the right to negotiate, we have the right to be consulted, we have legal legislation that means that they must carry out risk assessments. We have food safety reps and the health and safety brand book. We're entitled to have committees and discuss these issues as workers representatives. You know, we're entitled. So, this is our moment. If a machine takes your job, who takes responsibility for your safety? I mean, you stick a machine doing your job, who's going to be responsible for the safety? I mean, you know, if you, what do I mean by that? So they put on the floor loads of chains, they use that for running their, basically taking down to the warehousing the stacked products. They think that that's resolved an issue of manual handling. But what happens when that machine breaks down? And you have to start manual handling again. What is the processes they put in place for that manual handling? Have you got agreements in place? Because one of the things that's been really interesting because of COVID is that we have a lot of people now that slip and fall downstairs. And when they're filmed, because obviously we have cameras all over the place, I'll talk about that in a minute, nobody's holding the banister or the rail. And there's a reason for that. It's because during COVID, everybody was told, don't touch that, because if you do, you might get COVID. And of course, that's in everybody's psyche. So people have stopped using the handrails when they go down the stairs. And we've had a lot of slips and falls downstairs. And so now we have to retrain people again. So, you know, when we give instructions to people, we have to make sure that we don't just think about that, we think about the consequences of those decisions too. You know, some of the machines might be new, but the right to work safely, with dignity, and unique protection is ours. It's all right. It's what we have the right to expect in our workplaces. We can use automation to build union power. I don't disagree with what's been said by the speakers. You know, we have an opportunity to grasp the improvements that's possible. One of the things that we negotiated with an employer was the recognition that actually we need to get rid of the lower paid roles and actually start talking about technical roles. And the reason behind doing that is because when I said I came into the food industry as the president, we used to do clip art leaflets. Okay, next one. We used to do clip art leaflets. When we did clip art leaflets, it looked very poor. And the majority of our people in the future are going to be technical. Our automation is automated packet lines, they're expanding quickly. I've got to rush up. Multiple systems now input ingredients into mixes, more complexity, less human control. The fast-paced rollout leaves little time to assess safety or consult workers because everything's going through the process. You know? They transport our products, like I've said. More robotic systems are expected to follow. Key concerns are workers, consulted, protected and reskilled. We can do it. I mean, we've demonstrated in our negotiations that it can be done. Trial systems monitor how people work. We have standard operating procedures. Those standard operating procedures have been cut across now because of the introduction of tech and AI. So it does raise big questions. It's also, they're using them to spy on people. And if you don't follow your standard operating procedure because you no longer can, you can face disciplinary. So again, union involvement in defining and using this data is essential because you use the data it produces too if you're not bending over correctly because it flows your non-decision. we work in the bread sector, but yet they're interviewing clocking systems that will have potential facial recognition on them. I mean, we're just clocking into work. Let's make some bread. New computer systems are being introduced without consultations. I mean, it's got all sorts of personal data on it, like your medical health, which is then shared with occupational health. And then you start getting emails about insurances, funnily enough. And we must demand transparency. It must be risk assessed, it must be part of the bargaining. And thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry I had to speak through that.
I'm sorry I had to rush you at the end. I mean, I think some of the things that you talked about, you know, the dignity of work, and you see workers who are having to hold their hands up and tell them